One of the biggest benefits about advertising on the Google Display Network can also be one of its biggest downfalls, and that's the amount of reach that it actually has across the internet. The Google Display Network through AdSense can be on just about any website that's out there. So that means that we as marketers are able to reach wide ranges of audience members no matter what type of content they're looking at across the web, but it also means that we can show up in some places that we might not want. So today what I want to talk about is a few tips and tricks I've developed over the past decade of being in advertising of making this process a little less painful and saving a little bit of time to try to find the placements that we don't want our ads to show up around the Google Display Network, and how we can save performance, but also make sure that we're preserving our brand safety by not showing up in places that we shouldn't be. Let's hop in. This video is brought to you by Shape, an all-in-one PPC budgeting solution designed for you to control, organize, and collaborate on PPC ad spend at scale. Ready to start saving some time? Check out the link below to learn all about Shape. Okay, so there are going to be two major sections that we walk through as we're talking through how to review our GDN placement reports. And the first set of filters that I'm going to talk about is based on performance and the different types of metrics that we're seeing coming from our campaigns, our account, that sort of thing, and kind of what we want to look for here. There are two key mindsets that we're going to take as we're going into this, and I'm going to walk through an example in an Excel report here in just a second. But the two major things that we're going to be looking for are trying to find specific placements that aren't hitting our goals, or anything that looks suspicious. I think that if you've done any advertising on the GDN, you know that there are going to be some placements that are likely less than savory, and you just start to see some really weird performance. Sometimes there are actually bots involved. You usually get refunded for that, but we want to keep an eye out for anything that just looks suspicious. So let's go ahead and hop into a report and start to take a look at the performance that we're seeing in this account and how we can start to filter. The first thing that I want to say is that this is not the standard automatic placements report. I've doctored this a little bit for this video, so if your report doesn't look exactly like this, there's a good reason for it, but I wanted to make sure that we hit kind of the highlights and talking about the filters that we want to look at and what I typically look at when I'm doing a placement review. So the first thing that I want to do is make sure that all of my ads are showing on sites or YouTube channels or apps that actually make sense for my target customer. Where are they actually engaging with my brand? And the first thing that I like to do there is look for sites that have lots of impressions and 0 clicks, because I want to make sure that we're not just serving hundreds, thousands of impressions to people and just bothering them without providing any value. If they're not going to click on your ads, they're probably not interested, especially on that placement. So the first thing I'm going to do is filter for 0 clicks. And now my report is already descending by impressions, but if it wasn't, you could come in here and click descending, and it will order them from largest to smallest numbers. Obviously, we can see that there are some really big impression counts with no clicks. To be quite honest, the account that this report came from has been running for over 5 years. It's gone through many different agency hands. This is all a lot of historic data because I wanted to show you a lot of different instances here. Just keep that in mind. But there are some ones that stand out. Obviously, 172,000 impressions almost with 0 clicks. That's a problem. I know what this company does, and this website is actually for an online referee company, which has nothing to do with what this company is trying to sell. There's no doubt as to why we've got a lot of impressions and 0 clicks, but there are some in here that are pretty common. Like, I know what Tumblr is, but I don't know what some of these other websites are. But it doesn't necessarily matter because we're seeing lots of impressions come through here and people simply aren't clicking. They're not engaging. Now, there are a couple different lines in the sand you can draw on this. For a larger account like this one, obviously there's a lot of impressions coming through here. This account has been running for quite a while, like I said. This is one instance where I might say any site that has over 1,000 impressions and 0 clicks needs to be excluded. But that might be way too large of a filter depending on what size your account is. If you've got a smaller account, maybe say a website has to have 1 click after every 500 impressions or 1 click after every 100 impressions. That would actually get you to a 0.01 click-through rate at having 1 click out of every 100 impressions. That might be a little bit restrictive, but if you're trying to be really conscious of who you're targeting on the GDN and you want to make sure that you're going into specific placements where people will engage with you and you're trying to be extra brand safe, the 1 out of every 100 might make sense. But in this account, I would exclude only the sites that have 1,000 or more impressions, simply because otherwise we'd be excluding quite a number of placements from our campaigns. Now, the second one I want to talk about is still in the same range of clicks, trying to focus on the amount of clicks that we've got. And I'm going to clear this filter because one of the other things that I have commonly seen on the GDN are abnormally high click-through rates. And this is something that I always look at. So just come into the click-through rate area and hit descending. You'll see that there are quite a number of placements that actually have a 200% click-through rate, which is ridiculous. Obviously, this one has an average cost per click of $2.97, so we've paid $6, even though technically it only has 1 impression. My rule of thumb is basically anything that has a click-through rate of 100% or higher is likely spam. There are going to be a number of different placements in here that have 1 click, 1 impression. I will leave that up to you. Some of those could be some of your retargeting campaigns. Maybe that's just a very, very targeted placement. And like you can see here, this one even has 1 conversion. Maybe that's a good one to keep, but for the most part, saving me some time, if something has likely over 1 click and it has a 100% click-through rate, I'm going to call that spam, and I'm going to think that that's probably a bit of junk. If you do see some of these, like I've shown you, that have conversions in here and you want to keep those, maybe take a second look at the ROI of those placements, whether it's through e-commerce and you're actually trying to see revenue, or more like for this site for lead gen, maybe you can start to track that back into Google Analytics and into your CRM to see if some of these leads coming through are at least decent quality before excluding. But again, just keep an eye on those things that have abnormally high click-through rates on the GDN, because those can be a sign that something's a little bit fishy. So the next thing I want to get into leans a little bit more into the performance that we just talked about. Obviously, we're running display campaigns because we want to get conversions. So one of the things that we want to make sure that we're hitting performance-wise is whatever target cost per conversion that we have. The next one I'm going to do is filtering for 0 conversions and then descending cost. Okay, in the account that I'm showing you the data for, there are some that have a decent amount of spend and no conversions. The target cost per lead in this account is about $30. Some of these are certainly quite a bit higher, nothing alarming too drastic, but there are definitely some optimizations we can make. So this one at $138, that's quite a bit higher than our $30 cost per lead. But since we want to give it some flexibility, we want to try and get some volume out of it. I would say here maybe everything that has over twice the cost per lead, so $60 or more without converting, maybe those are the ones that we need to exclude. So not a ton of placements here, but it's a good way to take a look at it and make sure that you don't have lots of placements that have really high spend and no conversions, really just eating through your budget on a regular basis. So the next thing I want to do is still in the conversion realm, but what I want to do is actually see what the highest converting placements are. So I'm going to come into conversions and hit descending. And now we can see that there is one placement that has 1,000 conversions, but the cost is much higher than all of the other placements that are in here. It's got $20,000 in spend, and the cost per conversion is relatively normal. The click-through rate is at 11%, which is a little bit higher, but you can see some of these other ones that have lots of conversions. The click-through rate is a bit higher than what it would be on normal GDN placements, which is usually in single digits. All of the performance that's coming out of here is at least relatively normal for what we're seeing in the account. What I try to do with this descending conversions view is just make sure that nothing crazy is standing out, that the conversions are super high but the cost isn't, or conversions are really high but click-through rate is also super high, something like that. We probably would have filtered that, but again, maybe click-through rate was 75% or something along those lines, and we're still seeing 1,000 conversions. That might be a little bit interesting to look at, and maybe I do want to still take a look at what this website is, but but for the most part, everything looks relatively normal. So this is kind of the biggest thing, is just making sure that everything here looks normal and nothing really stands out as too fishy in your highest converting placements. And right now, everything looks pretty good. So then the next thing we want to do is look at how our converting placements are doing in relation to our CPL goals. So we've already done this a little bit in terms of looking at cost and no conversions, but what about the ones that are converting? So let's uncheck everything that has not converted and then do an ascending cost per conversion. What this does here is start to show me some of these that are really low cost per conversion. This is one of those areas that I'm just looking for fishy performance. If something has one conversion for a 19-cent cost per lead, but that's because it's only got one click, that's one thing. That might not be anything to really worry too much about. It might not be in the realm of normal, but right now I'm just kind of skimming to see if anything looks out of the norm. And for the most part, all these conversions are single digit until we get to this one. So everything's single digit, and now we're starting to see one that has 60 conversions for a $4.61 cost per conversion. 17% click-through rate, as we saw in previous versions of this report. That might not be too high for this account, but this is probably a website to go check out. Just go look at it manually, see what miraclesalad.com is about. My guess is that just by the name, it is not relevant to this account, but this is the kind of thing that you're looking for with this ascending cost per conversion filter. Same thing down here, 13, localtransit.net might be useful, could be in a retargeting campaign, might not be, but that's the kind of stuff that we're looking for, something that stands out from the norm. And now I want to do the same thing, but the other way. So we just look to see if there's any fishy behavior with low cost per conversion, but what about areas where the cost per conversion is too high compared to our goal? So I'm going to hit descending cost per conversion, and now we have a number of placements in here that are quite a bit over our $30 cost per lead target. Something at $210, obviously that's way too high. Good news is most of these don't have tons of conversions. It always is kind of a double-edged sword if you have something up here that has 70 conversions, but it's just way too high cost per conversion. Do you want to cut the leads, or do you want to be more efficient? You got to kind of make that choice. Basically anything here that is just way too high, we want to cut that out and make sure that we're seeing good performance across any of these. So same sort of thing here. Maybe I'll give it a little bit more flexibility since it is converting, and then maybe anything with $70 or $75 or higher cost per lead, I'll cut out of this campaign. And it's a little bit different than a site that is not converting, but is just spending, because this at least has shown that it can convert. So maybe I'll give it a little bit more flexibility over that 2x CPL goal of $60 that we talked about for the higher cost, no conversions filter. Now, the last thing I want to look at might only make sense for your account if you use lots of different bid modifiers, or if you're using some sort of fully automated bidding strategy. And that's going to be descending cost per click. So I'll just go into the average CPC column, hit descending, and now we'll see that the highest cost per click that we're paying for any placement is about $3.14. That's not super crazy. I'm really not too worried about that. Most of the things in here are $3 or lower. That's a pretty normal cost per click on the GDN. What you can see sometimes, especially if you're using, like I said, lots of bid modifiers, or if you're using a fully automated bid strategy, it might be that your average cost per click for your display campaigns is maybe $2, $2.50. But you'll come in here and you'll start to see that there are some placements that are upwards of $5, $6, $7, maybe $10, $15 cost per click, because the algorithm deems them highly valuable, or you've somehow layered in lots of bid modifiers that really ups the bid percentage on those specific placements. This is one of those areas where you can hopefully kind of keep those things in check and try to exclude things that, for whatever reason, the bid algorithm is getting really aggressive on, and make sure that you're still keeping your cost per click in a normal range. Or you might not want to exclude it altogether. Maybe you just use it as a managed placement in a different campaign. Then you can adjust the bid accordingly for just that individual placement. But this is certainly something to keep an eye on to make sure that your CPCs for any individual placement aren't getting way out of control. Okay, so as a quick recap on the performance consideration, this is just a list of the filters that I would use. No clicks and descending impressions to find anything that's just serving your ad a ton, bothering your target audience, but they're not engaging with it. Finding anything with click-through rates over 100% and trying to get rid of them because they might be fraudulent behavior. Anything that has 0 conversions but really high cost, especially stuff that is getting 2, 3, 4 times the target CPA that you have for the account. Anything with descending conversions to make sure that there's no fishy performance going on there. And then looking at things that do convert for ascending cost per conversion, again, to make sure there's nothing fishy, and and descending cost per conversion to make sure that you're still hitting your CPA goals that you have for the account. And then the last thing is the descending CPCs to make sure that your bid modifiers or your automated bid strategy aren't going way outside the realm of normal to have way too high a clicks on any individual placement. Now, the next set of things I want to talk about are content considerations. The last set was based on how are each of these placements performing. This section is basically focusing on what are these placements about. Either is my brand safe here? Do I want to show up next to this? Is this relevant in any way? Can the people who look at this site even understand what I'm talking about? And those are some of the things that we want to look at to make sure that we're covering not only from performance, but content considerations as well. So the list I have here is something that I've put together from being in the industry for about 10 years now. This is the one that I actually personally use whenever I go through a Google Display Network placement report. And a lot of it has to do with trying to mitigate any, one, really high impression types of sites that I've seen over the years. Two, any sites that just seem like people are trying to kill time on the internet. Or three, trying to find sites that are almost always exclusively in foreign languages and that I'm assuming my target audience won't be able to understand my ads if they're seeing them on those sites. Or maybe they will understand what's on those sites, but it would still be kind of strange to have a fully Chinese or Russian site with my English ads next to it. It's just not a super great user experience, so it's something that I want to run through. Effectively, what you would be doing here is taking each of these, doing a filter for the text contains in either Google Ads or in your Excel sheet, wherever you're doing your reporting, and filtering for any placement that includes arcade, funny, meet, quiz, any of these things, .ru, .tv, where people are just trying to watch their TV online and they don't care about your ads. It's not saying that these categorically make the most sense, and maybe you have your own list after looking through lots of placements yourself, but this is the kind of thing that I would look at and say any URL that has joke in the name or quote or astrology, these are just people trying to find something to do on the internet, and they're really not trying to figure out what I'm trying to sell them. These usually are categorical exclusions for me. Okay, so the next ones I have for you are actually specific examples that I have gotten from other people that I think can be really helpful and has really kind of stepped up my game when it comes to placement exclusions. And the first is from a friend of mine, Aaron Levy at Tenuity, and he talked about how you can find the page title in a Google Doc. Back in the day, I used to have to actually go to each one of these websites to know what they were. I would have to go to wincalendar.com to know what it was about, but now I don't have to. So what you can do is you can take this formula up here at the top, the import XML, and then title and text over here, and create that formula in your placement report as long as you're doing it in a Google Doc. I typed out the formula here in this screenshot as well. So we've got just writing it again for you. So import XML, and then cell I left as red because you need to utilize the actual name of the cell, the location of the cell. So in this example, that needs to be the placement URL. So this would say import XML, open parentheses, B1, and then the title text toward the end. In this cell down here, this row where vertex 42 is, in this formula, cell is actually B2. That's what it's pulling in. And you can see here that once you type that in and you hit enter, it will show you the actual page title of each of these. So Houston Local News, that's cron.com. And now we know that wincalendar.com is wincalendar. Calendars, holidays, days, and today, which sounds about like a calendar. There will be some that won't show up for whatever reason, but this is a huge, one, time saver, and two, sanity saver when you are trying to figure out what in the world some of these URLs actually are, what some of these websites are, and it'll save your eyeballs from some really horrible sites around the web. I definitely encourage you to utilize this tool and then start maybe utilizing those same content filters that I showed on the last slide, or just looking at them and seeing if they make any sort of sense for your account. The next one is from another one of our friends, Kirk Williams at Zato. And because of this coronavirus thing, which hopefully by the time you're watching this, we are at least some way toward progress. But basically what he wanted to help his clients do was to stay out of news sites, because all the news is currently just consumed with coronavirus, and they don't want their brand associated with that. What Kirk did is he did a number of content filters similar to what I showed you before to find things that talked about news, coronavirus, anything like that, and put together an entire placement exclusion list for all of those news organizations. And I'll have the link in the show notes below that you can check out. Highly encourage you to do that. Even if it's not for coronavirus, this list would be great to stay out of any news site in case you just don't want to show up alongside the news, because we really never know what's coming along. And then the last one I've got is actually from my co-host, Joe Martinez, around kids' YouTube channels. And we have a video for this list, so you can go find it, but it's very similar to the list that we just talked about from Kirk at Zato. And basically what it is trying to keep your ads off of lots of kids' YouTube channels, because those kids don't want to buy your products. They don't have any money. They don't have any credit cards. Likely the phone they're searching and clicking for your ads on isn't even their phone. It's their parents' phone. So this is another great way to stay away from people just content oriented, that we just don't want to be in front of those people. Doesn't necessarily matter what the performance is. You're likely not going to sell B2B enterprise SaaS solutions to a child who is watching a YouTube channel that is meant for children. Just another one of those to add. So to wrap up, content considerations, we want to look at domain suffixes as well as key phrase filters to find sites that just don't make any sense, whether you're doing that through looking at the domain itself, or if you're using that handy little function from Aaron at Tenuity to find the page titles in that Google Doc, then you can start to exclude them that way. And then getting rid of news sites, whether it's for COVID or not, trying to make sure that we are staying out of the news, keeping your brand safe away from whatever could hit the news cycle next, and keeping all of the correlations away from that, or just trying to keep your business out of the hands of children, if you will. Making sure that you're not serving lots of impressions, racking up lots of spend to kids when they're not going to be the ones who buy your product. And that's it. Pretty simple. From both performance and brand safety perspectives, we want to make sure that we're excluding placements that just aren't the right fit for our ad campaigns. So hopefully these tips will save you a little bit of time, save you brain space, and hopefully save you from visiting some websites that are a little less than savory in the future. Thanks for watching our video. If you thought it was useful, give us a thumbs up below.
We release a new video at least once a week, so if you want to get notified of when a new one comes out, be sure to subscribe to the Paid Media Pros channel.